what Chris and I expected when we came out here, but I mean, so far this has just been such a wonderful seminar, and I want to thank the Ayaan Foundation for asking us to come out here. We were deeply humbled to be here and to even be asked to be present here in New York City, one of my favorite cities in the world. Having been especially on top of the World Trade Center about 2.5 weeks before we were attacked, when I was out here on the Sammy the Bull Gravano case. And having looked at the bios that I have seen in our programs, I know Chris and I are both even more humbled to have even been asked to participate in such an honorable thing. We're here to talk about the Almaleki case and the trial that we just recently completed in February. And to talk about, again, this tragic murder and the attempted murder of two beautiful women, Noor Almaleki and Amal Khalaf, both who were run down in cold blood by Noor's father, Falah, in Peoria, Arizona on October 20th, 2009. And while we are humbled to be here, we cannot lose the concept that we are only here because a young woman tragically lost her life, and another woman has been now ostracized from her Iraqi community here in the Peoria, Arizona desert, and she continues to suffer pain and ostracization as to this day. Anyway, Chris and I both got involved in this case. Neither one of us expected to have the profound effect that it did have on both of us. Both of us have spent many a sleepless night over this case. And again, it was an effect that neither one of us expected. We were dedicated to the case, as we are to all of our cases. I would like to think our victims would think so, but this one hit us to the core. And you know, Chris and I, when we were getting ready to do this presentation, we're like, you know, what was it that made this case different for us? We see horrible senseless crimes occur on a daily basis. We're both obviously have been around a while, and like I said, I obviously don't look a day over 25, but so I must have been a child prodigy. You know, but because of the number of years that we have spent in law enforcement and doing these crimes and, you know, prosecuting and investigating, you know, it's a survival mechanism to become strong and have to put personal feelings aside in a case, otherwise we'll just go crazy. But again, this case just affected us like no other. And we had to ask ourselves why. Why did the murder of Noor, the attempted murder of her friend Amal, strike at the two of us so deeply? Why did this case have such a profound impact upon us? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, that we can only be obtained by having you look inside the case and see really what it was all about. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
I'm here to tell you that if you don't think it can happen in your community, whether it's New York City or Peoria, Arizona, this case right here is proof of every earmark that the speakers talked about this morning. It's this case. And as a detective that's been around for a while and I've done a lot of different cases, it kind of struck me. And I hopefully, you know, obviously this is an educational thing, but awareness is one of the biggest things that we want to get out there for guys and gals that are investigating and trying these cases, and that's why we're doing what we're doing today. So, you know, just a little bit about the city of Peoria. Thank you. A little bit about the city of Peoria. We are a suburb of the city of Phoenix. We are located just west of the city of Phoenix. We're a city of about 200,000 people. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we were one of the fastest growing cities in the United States of America. So we've seen rapid population growth within the last 10 to 15 years. Obviously that's slowed down with the economy in the last 3 or 4 years. We also, in the Phoenix metropolitan area, have one of the largest populations of people from Muslim countries living in that area. Some estimates are as high as 40 to 50,000 or more people that have immigrated to the United States from those areas. And so, did I know that before this case started? No, I didn't know that. I mean, I dealt with cases involving people from these regions, but I didn't know personally until I got involved in this investigation that we had that large of a segment of the population living in our community. The city of Peoria is kind of your common, I guess, bedroom community. We have a wide range of socioeconomic conditions within the city. We have very low-income, poverty-stricken areas, and we also have $1 million homes. So it's kind of a very diverse community. This investigation started on October 20th, 2009 at about 1:58 p.m. At that time, the Peoria Police Department began responding and receiving 911 calls about an incident that occurred at the Department of Economic Security building located at 8900 West Peoria Avenue. We call it DES. I don't know what they call it in New York, but basically that's where you go to get your public benefits. Very busy place. Usually the parking lot is extremely full of vehicles, lots of foot traffic coming in and out. This was in the afternoon, so right after lunchtime, so it was a very, very busy place that day. The calls were numerous. I think we got 2 to 3 initially, and then several other ones that came in, and all of them were advising that there was 2 young women that had been hit by a vehicle that were still in the parking lot. And one of the things that we got real lucky with in this investigation early on were 2 things, and we'll talk about the second one, but there was a civilian on scene with a camera. Every one of our scenes has probably got somebody with a camera. This guy started taking photographs before we even get there, and here you see the first arriving officers, but it really kind of gives you a placement of where these 2 women were, because as we know, when we get to our scenes most of the time, things can be messed up. A lot of times our victims are gone. But here we have them in their place where they were found. Our first officer gets on scene. Amal Khalaf is the one that's on the ground. You can obviously see she's got some significant trauma to her left leg, the rotation of her ankle, and that she had a shattered femur. You can see Noor in the background there with a lady tending to her, and she was not conscious, barely breathing, and very near death when the first officers on scene got there. Like I said, they were directed to 2 women who had been struck. Their purses were there, so we were able to tentatively identify them as 20-year-old Laura Almaleki, and the other one is 40-year-old Amal Khalaf. And these are those photos we were talking about that were taken by a citizen. Nora's unconscious. She had very labored breathing and blood streaming from her mouth. The second photo on the bottom is Amal. She was conscious and she was talking, but one of the things that we ran into is that Amal doesn't speak English. Very limited English. So it was difficult for the first arriving officers and any witnesses to get a description of what happened and whether or not, at this point, we didn't know if this was an accident or if this was something else. The information we got was that 2 people got hit, they gave a vehicle description, and that the vehicle was taken off from the scene. So one of our first challenges was that language barrier. So we're thinking to ourselves, if this wasn't an accident, then, who could have done such a thing? And that was one of our first questions. And we did luck out a little bit. We didn't have somebody that was standing there that actually saw this guy drive his vehicle and hit these 2 women. But what we did, like I said, it's a very busy parking lot. We did have a lot of people that were going about their business and were able to hear. They heard the sound of the engine accelerating. They saw the aftermath. They heard the collision with the ears. They didn't see it, And then they obviously found the two women. They also saw the vehicle as it fled, and they were able to provide a fairly good description of the vehicle, of the driver, and a direction of travel for that vehicle after it left the scene. The suspect vehicle was described by eyewitnesses at the scene as a silver or gray-colored Jeep Cherokee. The driver was described as a male with dark hair, possibly a shirt, and possibly Hispanic. One of the first things that we do, and that we did in this case, was we knew that we had two fairly seriously injured victims here. So as normal practice, we sent a detective to the hospital. They had contacted us, and even before Amal had been transported to the hospital, she was able to say that this was not an accident. This was not an accident. She was able to tell us at the scene, the first officers there, that this was on purpose. This was something that was done to her on purpose. And she also was able to provide us a name very quickly as to who was driving that vehicle and who was the one that hit her. And it was later Almaleki. Falah is here, and that's Nora. Beautiful, talented, caring young woman. Amal tells us that Falah is in fact Nora's father, and that Amal and her family had formerly been friends. In fact, they lived together for a certain amount of time in the Phoenix area, and that Nora was very close to Amal, but there had been some friction between the two families recently.
What we learned during the course of the case was the two families had met when they were in Iraq. Or actually, I'm sorry, they did not meet when they were in Iraq. They were both from Iraq, but then met later when they both came to the United States. The defendant, Falah, had actually been in the Iraqi army under Saddam Hussein, and after some time of getting out of the military, at one point he and his family, consisting of his wife, Saham, their oldest child, Noor, and at that time they had a second child, a son, Ali, they escaped to Basra, Iraq. In Basra, the Almaleki family surrendered to the U.S. Army and applied for political asylum. From 1991 to 1994, they lived in various refugee camps in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and then moved to the U.S. in 1994 after being granted asylum, where they lived in Detroit, Michigan. It was very similar for Amal's family. They had also escaped the Saddam Hussein regime and ultimately made their way to the United States, I think through also Saudi Arabia. And then the two families met when they were in Michigan. Now, Amal's family later moved to Arizona, and then sometime later, the defendant himself called Amal from Michigan. He had a trucking job and asked if there were jobs in Arizona. So then, en route from a trucking job, he came to Arizona, started looking for some jobs, and then ended up moving his family out to Arizona after he lived with Amal's family. And this slide I want to mention here on the bottom, one of the I think materials that you have on your thumb drive will be some media resources regarding this case. I call it the tabloid magazine of Phoenix, but the Phoenix New Times actually did a very excellent series on this particular case, and that was the drawing that was used in the Phoenix New Times there at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it, but as the families moved to Arizona after some time, tensions began to arise between the two families, and it began growing as the Almaleki parents believed that Amal's family was to be not of their culture. The kids started getting in some trouble, Amal's kids did, but there were other things like wearing sleeveless blouses in the Arizona summer heat was also prohibited, among other things. But as Noor entered her teens, then the tensions also were strong between Noor and her parents. During the years leading up to the crimes, Noor had moved out several times. One time she was living with a friend of hers who was from Pakistan, and the defendant and his wife also did not like that because she was from Pakistan, even though she was Muslim. And she lived with other people, and then she also tried to get an apartment on her own and started trying to get jobs. But as we found out through the investigation, that her parents would harass her continually at any of the jobs that she would work in. On October 20th, 2009, Noor was actually living with Amal and her family. And then, as we were to discover, Noor and Amal's son, Marwan, had basically fallen in love and had started a relationship together. So that's just the background history regarding the two families. Going back to the investigation, while Noor and Amal lay broken in the hospital, the search was on for Falah. And as the search progressed, the question became, again, were these unfortunate accidents or crimes committed with motive and intent? And this is very important to try and answer this question as early on as possible. For if both the women survived, would we be able to prove attempted first-degree murder, which under Arizona law requires proof of premeditation, and if one or both of them should perish from their injuries, the question for us would then become on the issue of whether to charge first or second-degree murder, or possibly manslaughter. And then, of course, and I'll talk about this a little bit more regarding charging, but if we charge first-degree murder, that would give us the availability of the death penalty under Arizona law. So to answer that question, we start with looking at the crime scene evidence to determine if there's any evidence from the scene that gave us additional evidence to show that these acts were intentional. And we had Amal saying this was intentional. She could see Falah's angry face as he directed the car at her, as she testified in the trial also. But it wasn't enough, at least for the prosecution people, to go ahead and file first-degree murder or attempted first-degree.
You know, this investigation was a little bit different for me. You know, usually when we go out to cases like this, we're looking at people that get shot, looking at people that get stabbed, looking at people that get beat to death. Well, in this case, our weapon is a motor vehicle, 4,000-pound piece of metal. Well, I'm not a traffic guy, and for those of you that are cops, usually as investigators, we're the guys who really do the work. The traffic guys just look cool on their motorcycles and write tickets. So it's kind of an either-or thing. But I needed their help on this case because I'm not a traffic reconstructionist. So I was a little bit out of my element, I guess, when I did this investigation. So I did rely on our traffic reconstructionists. And if you look at this photo, it's hard to see, but this is our scene, okay? This is a driveway. If you remember that first picture of the building, the DES building sitting there, this is a driveway that runs north and south of the parking lot. The circle there denotes what we call a critical speed scuff mark. You see the raised median there, you see the tree that's knocked down, and also the stake there, the stabilizing stake that was broken. Right there. This is our path of travel for our suspect. You can see a couple things in this picture. We'll go back and talk about the speed scuff mark. It's basically what that is and how it's explained to me and how I understand it is when you're driving a vehicle at speed, when you have some accumulation of speed going down the road on a surface and you turn the wheel, you make a steering input. Okay? The outside of that tire is going to leave a rubber deposit on the ground. And it doesn't happen if you're going 2 miles an hour, it doesn't happen if you're going 5 miles an hour. We're talking there's got to be a little bit of speed behind that to lay that sort of track. So as we can see, very early on in the investigation, and my reconstructionist said, you know, within about 15 minutes of walking around the scene, he said, this is not an accident, this is an on purpose. And So we see this mark, and you can't see it very well, but it's a very distinctive mark that's going in that direction, right where our victims are standing. We go to the next slide. You can see his path of travel. You can see the tire transfer on the raised median. You can see what we call furrowing in the gravel. That means that vehicle is up into that gravel and it is moving forward. Okay, obviously because of the type of surface we have there, that soft gravel is going to slow that vehicle down to a certain extent. He knocks over the tree, he snaps the stabilizing stake in half, and we believe that Nora was probably standing right about there when she got hit. And when she got hit, the whole front end of the vehicle hit her square in the middle. And he didn't stop, he didn't slow down, he ran over, right over the top of her, and drug her under the undercarriage of that vehicle. The ball, we believe, was slightly in front of her and just off the curb. When he inputted that steering wheel towards these two women, it was an intentional act. And you can see there would be absolutely no reason in the world why anybody should be driving in that location at any time. The ball's hit first. She's able to tell us later that as she turns around, she sees him coming and puts her hands up and says, "No, no Abu Noor." Well, that means father of Noor. She described him as having a mean or angry or irritated look on his face. She turns to run and he hits her. She gets thrown 25 to 30 feet from the impact, shattering her femur, vertebrae, several internal injuries. If you can imagine that, he continues that turn with Noor standing right here. As we look later, when we look at some of the damage to the vehicle, you'll see that the middle of the front grille of that Jeep is smashed in half, and that's exactly where she took the impact. And like I said, ran her completely over and drug her on the undercarriage, and we saw where she landed, where she was found. As he gets done doing that, he continues through the gravel and turns south on the sidewalk area. Drives down the full distance of the sidewalk, back out to the parking lot, and then exits it onto what's Peoria Avenue right there, westbound. So, I mean, based on a couple things now, Amal's initial statement at the hospital, the physical evidence that was left at the scene, we don't have a lot of blood spatter here. We don't have a lot of biological evidence here. What we do have is a surviving victim statement. And if you know what you're looking for, some pretty good physical evidence. So at this point, we're dealing with the crime. We're dealing with the crime. We're dealing with something that happened on purpose. At this point, we're still alive, but in very critical condition. And Amal's also suffered some very significant injuries. So the question becomes then is, what were these ladies doing at this location on that day? Well, we know that Nora and Amal went to the DBS building on that day and arrived there. And this is the waiting room. Now imagine this completely full. With lots of people waiting to get public assistance. And this number, take this, we're serving number 47, becomes something that's very kind of pivotal in this case. And it's something that the defendant really talks about later on. Well, how they're there and how our defendants there, Falah's there. How is that? You know, as much as we like to say that you know, he knew they were there, we believe that it kind of was happenstance that they were there at the same time. Nora was there to translate for them all. Falah had been out of work, so he was actually applying for public assistance, and we believe that in all probably it was one of those things where we're both there at the same time, at the same place.
The question became then, if it was happenstance if they happened to be there at the same place at the same time. Did the defendant see Noor in a mall there, and vice versa? And we found out that indeed, at least Noor had seen her father. Amal had said that Faleh had looked right at her, but we didn't know if he had seen Noor. So then Noor began texting her friends, as we were able to find out later, when officers went into the phone.
One of the first things we did, and we do on most of our cases, is we pull cell phones. As we all know, cell phones are kind of a wealth of information for us as investigators. People spend more time on their cell phones than they do talking face to face, and as a result, we did find some very good information. Within about 12 hours of this case, we were able to get a hold of the cell phone that was with Noor, and we were able to start looking at it and forensically analyzing it. And obviously, it's very, very clear that she did in fact see her dad. She texts her friend Ushi Love, which is her best friend's Ushna. Pretend you're me and compare yourself to Ali. Ali is Noor's brother, oldest son of Faleh and Seyhan. You'd have a lot to talk about. Laugh out loud. Dude, so scary shit. I'm with my aunt at the welfare place, and guess who walks in? My dad. I'm so shaky. This isn't a normal text that probably your daughter would send to her best friend. Obviously, they're showing some amount of fear in her life. The second one is Ushi responding back, holy shit, did he see you? The next one is Noor sending a text back to Ushi. I don't think so, his fat ass is right by the door, so I can't even leave, laugh out loud. I'm laughing like a crazy person. I hate this. I hate when this happens to me. I knew I shouldn't have woke up. She sent a follow-up to Ushi saying, my dad is a manipulative asshole. I've honestly never met anyone with so much evil. The story is so long, it's worth telling over mochas, laugh out loud. Again, I haven't had a mocha in years. I can't drink them unless we're on good terms. I've tried lots of times, but it just feels wrong, laugh out loud. So Noor obviously seen him. And obviously it's very, very clear that these text messages also show us that the relationship between her and her father was very strained, and that even she had some fear of him. These text messages and other ones that we recovered during this investigation, again, lend themselves to tell us and show us that this was something that was done on purpose. This was something that was thought about and something that was carried out and was not an accident. So we're building our case here. We're building our case, making it to anybody that would look at this case, not an accident. It was an intentional act. One of the first things that we did at the scene after we got briefed on the incident was, and briefed on who Mr. Almaleki was. Obviously, we did a lot of background on him and found out where he lived, and we discovered that yes, he did in fact have a 2000 Jeep Laredo registered to him. And we found his home address. So myself and other guys on my squad went to his home in Glendale, and Glendale's one city next to us. We kind of all run together there, and initiated a surveillance operation on the residence there. The first thing we saw about 10 minutes into it was a younger male come out of the garage and take delivery of a couple pizzas and go back inside. So at that point we knew somebody was there. So after about another 10 or 15 minutes of watching the place and making sure we had enough resources there, knocked on the door. The defendant wasn't there, but his son was there. The door was answered by his son, Ali, who at that time was about 21 years. He was the oldest son, oldest child of Faleh and Seyhan. And he proceeded to pretty much lie to me for the next hour and a half. He denied speaking to his father on the cell phone or talking to his father since he had left early in the morning. But he did tell us some things. He did tell us, and he did confirm that the relationship between his father and Noor was strained. and that she had been going out of her way to kind of disrespect him and the family, and that Falah was frustrated with Noor because she's becoming too westernized. She wasn't adhering to traditional Iraqi values, and that was a big point of contention for the defendant. Ali also talked a little bit about Noor being sent to Iraq to marry somebody, basically in an arranged marriage. But every time, you pressed Ali on getting more information, he would kind of shut down and say he didn't want to get involved, that he didn't know anything, and continuously, I don't want to get involved, I don't want to get involved. Well, as you know, if you don't have that kind of information and we're talking in an investigation, you're involved. So this goes back and forth for a couple hours, actually, and I didn't leave. I can kind of be a pain in the butt sometimes. So I stayed outside, and Ali would come out of the house every so often and give me a little bit more information. One of the things that we found out was that Falah was an insulin-dependent diabetic. And that came in handy a little bit later on in this investigation. So Ali would give us little tidbits, little bits of nuggets, little information. One of the things he did also give us was that he provided us with his father's cell phone. And again, cell phone in this investigation comes up as a very large piece that helps us ultimately kind of find out where he'd been, what he did, and who he was with. So after talking to him off and on for a couple hours, my first thing is, he's not at the house, we don't know where he is. So my biggest responsibility now is to find out where he is. So in the next couple of days, we are doing everything that we can to locate him. We're up on his phone. When I say up on his phone, we're up on a pen register, trap and trace, basically monitoring when that phone is used, when it's turned on, when it's turned off, and where it's being used and what towers. Zippo, nothing, for several days. One of the things, though, I asked Ali before I left was, I said, Ali, if you hear from your dad, you need to call me. And if you don't, we're going to have a chat. But he didn't choose to talk to me. He chose to talk to local Phoenix media.
First, all new tonight at 10, we're hearing for the first time from the family of the young lady who was run over in the Peoria parking lot. Police say her dad did it, and he's been hiding ever since. Today, her brother spoke exclusively with CBS 5. Here's reporter Jose Miguel.
Peter, Ali Almaleki says for years now his father and his sister have been at odds. He says a lot of that stems from his sister choosing to not follow in the family's Muslim traditions. But he tells me he has no idea what it was that led to his father literally running his sister down in a parking lot.
I just never thought, like, this could happen.
For days now, Ali's sister Noor has laid in silence at an undisclosed hospital.
She's still unconscious, hasn't woken up, said a thing. She's moving around a little bit. They think it's spontaneous movement.
Noor has undergone spinal surgery, but there's still a chance she may never recover.
It's hurt my mom more than anybody.
Ali says part of the hurt is the tension between father and daughter for the last 2 years.
It's the people that she's living with that triggered my dad's anger.
Ali says his sister is married to an Iraqi man and lived in the Middle East with him until recently. Well, that's when she moved back here stateside. Ali says she moved in with a new man and her parents didn't approve.
The past 2 years, she's been going out of her way, being disrespectful, and the boy that's supposedly your boyfriend right now, I don't like him.
And for a traditional Muslim family, Ali says that disrespect was the ultimate insult to his father.
Different cultures, different values. One thing to one culture not going to make sense to another culture.
Ali doesn't condone what his father did.
And just seeing her in the hospital broke my heart. Nobody struck about that.
And even though he doesn't know where his father is now, they have heard from him.
He did call yesterday to ask how she was, and my mom yelled at him. And stop running from it. That's really the best way.
Tonight, Ali hopes his sister will be all right.
I love my sister.
And more than anything, he hopes that someday the entire family can mend from all of this.
Deep down, you know, you're always gonna have that love for somebody that's been so close to you your whole life.
In Phoenix, Osemigan, CBS 5 News.
Yeah, you'll find out how close he really was and how much he was concerned about his sister a little bit later on. That right there is how this case first became designated as an honor killing. The words were not from the police, the words were not from the prosecution, the words weren't even from the media. And, you know, the words that this crime was about, disrespect, came from Ali, who's also known as Peter, I'm not sure why, but, you know, that Noor was not doing what their culture demanded, even though she was 20 years of age and an adult at this time. And we'll see later that there was even more evidence supporting the son's statement that this was a killing done in the name of honor.
Talked a little bit before about the cell phones and the investigation and how pertinent that was. We obtained the Fallah's phone records, and it confirmed kind of what we already knew. He called Ali several times before and after the incident. He also called his wife, other family members, specifically in the Detroit, Michigan area. But the thing that we really saw early on when we looked at these cell phone records was that, you know, we're trying to determine, was this something that he did kind of as a spur of the moment thing, or was this something that he may have thought about and maybe premeditated? When we started looking at those phone records, the question to me, or the answer to me was, he was there for some time, he left, and he came back, and then he does what he does. The cell phone records show that he shows up first time on the phone at the DES building at 12:53 hours. It's an hour and 5 minutes before the first call. We know that because the cell phone tower is about a quarter mile away from the DES building to process all of those phone calls. We know that he goes in and we know that he takes his number. And that's when Amal and Noor see him. We know that he's there in that parking lot or in that area until about 1:15. The next 4 to 5 calls that he makes are processed by cell phone towers 5, 6, 7, 8 miles away from the scene location. So we know he's there and he leaves. And he later tells us in the interview that his number was too high, and he also confirms during that time that he did drive away. But he comes back. He comes back, and we know this again through our cell phone records, that he's on that phone outside that DES building with that same cell phone tower processing several additional calls. Up until almost the time of the incident. He's back at that DES office before 1:30. So he has almost 30 minutes of sitting there in his Jeep on the side of that building thinking about what he's going to do. Does that become a kind of a huge piece of evidence in this investigation? It absolutely does. Yeah. Anybody that's ever worked with cell phone providers and cell phone tracking stuff knows that sometimes there's a lack or a slowdown sometimes in the information that we get. But we did know this within a couple of days. We weren't getting any hits on the cell phone on the trap and trace. We got some updated records, and we know that the last phone call he made was processed by a cell phone tower in Nogales, Mexico. One of the first things that most of our bandits do in the Phoenix metropolitan area is they run to Mexico. Whether they're Hispanic, whether they're white, whether they're Iraqi, because they know once they get to Mexico, there's a certain level of anonymity there. I can't say that word. They're anonymous. And the Mexican law enforcement and officials down there aren't as tight as probably we are in the United States. So, once we found out that he had gone to Mexico, you can imagine that I had some choice words late at night screaming at the top of my lungs. But there's also some other things that we did. Remember if I told you that he was an insulin-dependent diabetic, we have a service in the Phoenix metropolitan area, it's called FaxNet. FaxNet is something that we send out information on individuals to hotels, motels, restaurants, hospitals, pharmacies. Some of the other speakers talked about, usually in cases like this, the whole family gets involved. Well, we found out that we got a call from a pharmacy within a day of doing that, somebody that looked exactly like Ayaan and somebody looked exactly like Ali in a vehicle that looked exactly like the one the Almalekis drove, they picked up a prescription the day after the incident. So there's a lot of things going on. We know that his phone's not operational now, but we have surveillance on all the vehicles, as many family members as we can. We've alerted as many people as we possibly could. We still can't find them though. One of the things that we do in Phoenix is we do have some relationships with officers on the other side of the border. And because at that point we believe he was probably in Mexico, that he had traveled over and that he had cell phone that was processed on the Nogales side of the border, I reached out to a highway patrol officer in Arizona that works the Tucson sector that has a relationship with the federal police in the Sonora province. Well, lo and behold, within about 12 hours of making a phone call, the Mexican police found the defendant's vehicle in a parking lot at a shopping mall in Nogales. It was recovered, it was towed, and one of our other detectives, Detective Juan Lopez, who's a Spanish-speaking detective, drove to the border and took custody of that vehicle and followed it back to Phoenix. When we get back to Phoenix, in the days after, we start doing a damage assessment. We do a search warrant on the vehicle to process it for evidence, biological evidence, mechanical inspection, that sort of thing. We see a couple of things here. We talk about the dent in the hood. That's the location where the ball was struck. Cracked windshield. And right here is a cracked front grille. So we have two different areas of impact. One on the front passenger side of the vehicle, on the hood with a large dent where a ball was struck, and then the front grille area, again windshield, where the door was struck. Like we talked about before, we determined and made several calls on his cell phone to his wife, his son, and family members before and after the incident. The last call he made before he left the Phoenix metropolitan area was processed by a cell phone tower less than a mile from his cousin Jamil's house, which later on becomes a little bit interesting as well. But you know what? This guy had no regard for anything. Instead of sticking around and being a man, he drives out of the city of Peoria, out of Maricopa County, out of the state of Arizona, and out of the United States of America to Nogales. We later learn, after we capture him, that he turned his phone off, obviously, in Nogales, but we later learned that he stays in Nogales for about 2 days. He then travels to Hermosillo by bus. And in Hermosillo, he catches a flight to Mexico City. Now, mind you, at this point, we're working on an Interpol warrant for him, but there was already an American warrant for attempted murder in the NCIC system. Nobody ever checked. Mexican Customs never checked his papers, his identification. So he's able to basically travel freely through Mexico. Like I said, he gets into Mexico City, and then he catches a plane from Mexico City and flies to London, England. And thank goodness for British Customs. They saved the day, because if they wouldn't have checked his passport or his papers, he'd been gone. He'd been gone. When he got off the plane at Gatwick Airport in London, he had to answer a series of questions, and he had very little money. His sponsor to get in the country, we believe, was Noor's husband, who was living in Scotland at the time. He had very little money, and he had no business being in Great Britain. He had no job, he had no permanent address. So British Customs said, sorry, we're going to administratively detain you. They run a short background on him. They find the American warrant for his arrest. So they put him in basically a processing center, and they call us up and they say, "You want this guy?" I said, "Yeah." So they said, "Well, listen, we're going to send him back to the United States. We're not quite sure where we're going to send him, but it's going to be the first plane back to the States." It happened to be to Atlanta, Georgia. So my partner and I got on a plane and we flew to Atlanta, Georgia on October 29th. So he's on the run for 9 days. When we get to Atlanta, he gets off the plane, and my first concern was, does this guy speak English or not? I mean, we knew that he was able to communicate. He was a truck driver, so that was one of the kind of my big concerns. Found out that he did. Spoke very good English, understood the English language, and one of the things that we decided to do is interview him as quickly as we could. Immigration Customs Enforcement headquarters is located there at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, and we interviewed him there. Unfortunately, they didn't have the capabilities to video the interview, but we do have an audible recording of it, obviously. You know, the interview was long. It was frustrating. It was kind of a cat and mouse game for several hours. He was not very forthcoming in most of the interview. He changed his story several times. He went from, it was an accident, I lost control, I lost my mind, to, I meant to scare them. That was our first breakthrough. I said, did you maybe mean to try to scare them? Yes. As a detective, we know we got a little sliver now, we're going to run that Mack truck through it. We tried. But he said some very interesting things during the interview as well. Constantly blaming them all and her family being bad people, being not of their culture, that we are a tribal society. And he constantly said, listen, look at her record, look at her family's record, look at this, look at that. Not once did he say, look at me. Not once did he take responsibility for anything that he did. And he told me repeatedly, if I wanted to kill them, I would have used a gun or a knife. I said, well, you didn't have a gun and knife. You had a 4,000-pound piece of machinery that you ran right out. So anyways, we get to, he was scared. I tried to scare him. And finally, him admitting that he didn't mean to hurt her. And that's as much as we were going to get. He also admitted to getting money from his cousin, Jamal, that somebody had brought him money when he was in Mexico. And not once did he ask how his daughter was. One time I said that, he said, well, ask Nora. Ask Nora. I said, I can't. Well, why not? Because she's almost dead. Very little response. We had a 5.5-hour plane ride back from Atlanta to Phoenix, and again, not one time did he ever ask how his daughter was doing. One of the most interesting things during the interview was that he made an analogy. He made an analogy saying that if you have a little fire, you have to put that fire out, or that small fire will burn the entire house down. That was one of those things where the light bulb went off, and I went, wow, is Nora the fire? And is the whole house your family? At first he agreed, and then he said, no, it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way. It's because that's why I was getting help from my family. Well, I think what he said first kind of spoke volumes about what he really thought. So that was kind of a big moment in the interview.
All right, so once we had the defendant back in Phoenix area, we then had to look at other information to determine, again, whether or not we had an intentional act or an accidental one. One of our favorite things to do, and I'm sure many of you law enforcement officers out there do that, is obtain jail calls, which, at least in our state, we don't need, we just do an administrative subpoena, and they're constantly recorded, they're constantly advised of that. He made numerous calls. All of them were in Arabic. And I know here in New York, you're probably at a much more advantage than we are trying to find translators. And so we did find one, an FBI civilian witness who was actually from Basra, if I recall correctly, and who did the translations for us. While we were waiting the translations, Noor passed away on November 2nd, 2009, 13 days later, and she passed away from cardiac arrest, obviously turning this now into not an attempted homicide anymore, but now an actual homicide case. In the 13 days that Noor was in the hospital, she had a spinal surgery and never regained consciousness. She died from cardiac arrest because her body had gone sepsis and she could not fight the infection. She actually had a urinary tract infection that her body could not fight because of the brain damage to her. And then that ended up causing a cardiac arrest. So we waited the translations, and it was turned to be worth the wait. For the calls confirmed specifically the motives behind the crimes. And again, it was all about honor. And this wasn't just one conversation or two conversations, these were several conversations that take place over various amounts of time, but this is what he repeats over and over again. And that's Almaleki right there, obviously. The defendant asked his family to protest before the American embassy in his defense because the killing, as he stated, was about honor. For an Iraqi without honor is worth nothing. There's Ali again, at a younger stage, there's Noor, and those are the other children, two females who I still worry about to this day because God only knows what their brother's going to do to them. He also instructed his family that when they protest before the embassy to write signs about honor. I'm not a criminal, I didn't kill someone from the street. So again, when the judge at the sentencing stated bullying the media for designating this an honor killing, I respect the judge very much as a professional friend of mine. I've done numerous cases about it, but he missed the mark at the sentencing because it was the defendant who made it about honor. So if this wasn't enough, in order to classify this as an honor killing, this notion of honor went on because as police investigated into what had happened with this family prior to these crimes, we found two prior instances with the police involving the defendant, Noor, and Amal. Again, that further established that honor was indeed the motive. The first incident occurred on May 6, 2008. And in his first report, Noor was driving a family car, crashed it into a light post, and walked away from the collision. Citizens who saw the collision, of course, called police, reporting it as leaving the scene of an accident. There was no injury because she was the only person involved. So police contacted the defendant, and he then stated that Noor had stolen the car. This was actually a family car. He also told police that Noor was dishonoring him by taking photos with boys who were not her husband. So there actually had been this Iraqi marriage brought up again, obviously a couple of years before the crime. Our problem on the marriage aspect of this, on this arranged marriage, was we could never establish whether or not the marriage had actually taken place. We had conflicting stories, a lot of it which would have been hearsay at the trial. So although this possible marriage came out at the trial, we couldn't call anybody to actually establish whether or not the marriage had occurred. From what we were able to glean in talking to her friends afterwards was that the marriage allegedly took place when Noor's parents, and we just heard about this just a little bit ago, Noor's parents tricked her into going to Iraq when she was 17, claiming that there was a sick relative there. Boy, when I was hearing that earlier, I was like, this sounds so familiar. Instead, she was to choose one of several brothers in a family, again, cousin or not, we're not sure, whom she was to marry, and then by virtue of her marriage, she would assist in getting him U.S. citizenship. It was never clear again if the marriage ever took place. Marwan, actually her boyfriend, and also Amal claimed that they had actually seen a video of what appeared to be a marriage, but that obviously Noor wasn't happy in engaging in this marriage. So this aspect about the arranged marriage became a big issue between Noor and her family. Then there was a second incident And this one occurred exactly 3 months to the day before the murder and attempted murder on July 20th, 2009. In this second report, the defendant and his wife trespassed into Amal's property at her home in an attempt to physically remove Noor and return her back to his house. Again, she's 20 years of age. Amal did not want to press any charges, so no police report was made. But it was later discovered that the defendant told the police, and this was actually a great thing that happened. Since there was no police report, we didn't have a whole lot of information of what happened in this particular incident. So we contacted the police officers who went out to the scene, and they actually, this was so distinguishing in their mind that even a year and a half later, after the crimes were committed, they remembered it so well when we went to trial. They said, well, you know, what do you remember about that? And this is what he told them. He said his laws were above those of the state, and he would rather go to jail for the rest of his life than be dishonored by his daughter. Well, we wanted to give him that much, granted. So we went ahead at trial. We moved to admit these two prior police reports. Thank goodness the judge agreed with this, and so all the evidence came in at trial regarding these prior police reports, again establishing that this was indeed an honor killing. Now, in addition to establishing the motive, the jail calls also confirmed that the defendant had absolutely no remorse for his crimes. And when he finally does learn that his daughter has died, he responded with one word: "Oh." And right after that went into asking them to protest in front of the embassy. Also in other jail calls, he went on to basically disrespect his daughter, saying things like, "No one messed up our life except Noor. In any way, she would have been gone. Noor is gone, but how about me? And she did not take the right path." He also then went on to state his disdain for Amal. He stated, "What can you do? It's these bitches that are burning us. And that bitch, Amal, is still in the hospital. Amal made a mockery of us, and Amal sealed her fate." And they constantly, especially his wife, constantly talked about how they wish that Amal would die in the hospital. And they had these conversations about Amal after their daughter had passed away. Now, then it came down to a charging decision. So now that Noor had passed, and Amal was in the hospital for several months, didn't get out until, I believe, December. The first question for us in terms of what to charge was, for Amal, was it attempted murder or aggravated assault? For Noor, was it second or first degree murder? And then, so we felt, with the content of the calls and the physical evidence, we felt we definitely had enough to pursue first degree premeditated murder. With that in mind, we charged first degree murder, and for Amal, both attempted first degree and aggravated assault. Should the defendant be convicted of both charges on Amal, the sentences would have to run concurrent. So now, since we decided to charge first degree murder, would the office seek the death penalty? In my office, the way that it works is if you get a first degree murder case, whether it's felony or premeditated murder, we have a committee that you go before, and they decide whether or not to recommend to the elected official whether or not to pursue the death penalty. The committee voted for the death penalty. It went up to the elected county attorney, and the elected county attorney declined to pursue the death sentence, much to our dismay. During the time that it was before the county attorney and for his deliberation, the defense filed a motion, and there's a copy, and I believe on your thumb drive that you were provided today. And they wanted the death penalty process open so they could challenge the death penalty notices that are filed for political, religious, cultural, or racial reasons. So they were accusing us, if we went ahead and did the death penalty, that we were doing this for cultural or racial reasons. Most disgusting in that motion, if you take a look at it, is they actually, to support their position, cite a statistic that in Basra there are 80 honor killings, but only 5 were prosecuted. So that they're kind of proud of that, and that's their argument for us not wanting to pursue the death penalty. The response that we filed is also there. Again, believe me, I wanted to say a lot more than I was able to. Anyway, okay. Just some quick, so what were some of our pre-trial issues I do want to talk about this really quickly. Because this became a big issue in the media. A month before we were supposed to proceed to trial, the defense desired a settlement conference. And a settlement conference in our state is where the parties sit down with the judge, who's not the trial judge, and try to resolve the case. Victims are allowed to be there, and other support people for the defendant if they want to be there. And so for this particular case, we pulled in a special judge. Who's now retired, and he works for the Supreme Court. And Ron's a good friend of actually both sides of the defense and the prosecution. And Ron was a little reticent because his last name is Reinstein, and so he's Jewish. So he's like, "Are you sure you guys want me on the case?" Well, then we had to tell him that, no, Judge Reinstein, it's fine because also the defense counsel was also Jewish. So he agreed to do it. He said, as long as your client's okay with it. We tried to keep the settlement conference under wraps because this had caused a lot of emotions in the Maricopa County metropolitan area. And unfortunately, the media did find out about it. And so we had news cameras and everything. They were trying to do this settlement conference. The state went into it making no offer, none whatsoever. But we're ethically obligated to participate in one of these. For their mitigation, for them to try and get us off the first-degree murder offer or charge, I guess, they had a psychiatric report done of the defendant, which contained some very interesting statements by the defendant, but which later became an issue whether or not we could use those. Long and short of it is that the defense wanted manslaughter, and we said, absolutely not. Ali, the son, and manslaughter would have given him a non-flat sentence. Second-degree murder was going to be flat time, and then obviously first degree, if he were convicted at trial, would give him anywhere from 25 to life or natural life on the first-degree murder. His son and I almost went to fisticuffs when he told me why don't I just give him 12 years soft time, because men in his family don't survive beyond 62 anyway, and since the defendant was 50, why don't I just give him the 12 years so he can live? When I promptly turned to him and said, well, too bad your father couldn't have given your sister, who you totally forgot about, the chance to live beyond 20. Asshole. That was yassle. Yassle. Okay.
It's a long afternoon.
Yeah. Anyway, the settlement conference was unsuccessful, and even though it was not due to the letter campaign where local news station encouraged everybody to write me personally telling me not to settle the case. So that was nice to walk in the next morning to my 8th floor office, to my elected official, going, what's going on? Pretty much this case was very much like prosecuting a gang case. We had all sorts of witness issues. There was no cooperation. They were difficult to locate. They wouldn't return phone calls, hesitant to give statement, and Chris will talk a little bit more about that.
Everybody doing okay? We got a lot to cover, so I'm going as fast as I can. One thing that I found out investigating this case was that there's a lot of fear in these communities. A lot of fear, especially from the young women in these communities. They're very fearful to come forward. North Springs, it took basically me calling them nonstop to have them come in and give a statement. And they were still very, very fearful that either the defendant, someone in the defendant's family, or somebody within the community was going to pay them back for talking to us. So we had some decisions to make. Obviously, her best friend, Ushna, the one that was on the text messages, we didn't call her because we felt that her safety might be at stake, and greater good is, keeping her safe. My FBI linguist, who is from Basra, who did all this work for us, who translated, 20 hours of jail calls. When we started doing defense interviews when we were getting ready for trials, he says, I'm not said, you work for the FBI. I'm not testifying. I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death that he's going to get me. Again, we had to make a decision whether or not were we going to compel this person to testify with a subpoena, or are we going to figure something else out? And thankfully we did, and that someone worked in Laura's office.
Just by a stroke of, God's blessings, luck, whatever you want to call it. There's a legal assistant in the Gang Review Defender Bureau who happened to have been born in Iraq. She's a Christian and is in my office and speaks fluent Arabic. Knows how to write it, speak it, whatever. And so 2 months before trial, we're scrambling to get those wonderful jail calls that are so crucial to our case translated. And she did it, and the defense agreed to it because we had another translator who the defense, they would not agree to the translated phone call. So it was just one of those strokes of luck. The other issues that we ran into happened with Amal, and they wouldn't return phone calls. Sometimes we couldn't find her for weeks. I didn't know up until like the day of trial if I was actually going to have Amal, a live victim, testifying, or if I was just going to have to do it by the evidence, which I could have, but obviously didn't want to. There were numerous pretrial issues also. This is a picture that I found on the web. I just love what you can do with the web anymore. This is apparently from Noor's senior yearbook, and that's Ali next to her. And he says, I admire that my sister is always there for me. I'm always able to talk to her no matter what. I'm going to miss my sister because there are just those times when I need her. She'll always be there for me and to give me a shoulder to lean on. Isn't that sweet? The defendant, or excuse me, Noor's mother actually had a restraining order on Noor at the time of her murder. We moved to preclude that and were successful. We did not dispute, and this did not come out, but every time the mother would go and visit Noor in the hospital and touch her, her heart rate would escalate. And so the defense moved to preclude that, and we agreed because the mother never testified. And then I provided a jury questionnaire for you also in your materials. Quickly, the trial, that line that you saw on the first slide, there is no honor in doing what is wrong. That's how we opened up opening statements by the prosecution. It's actually a quote from Thomas Jefferson. I didn't think I could find a better quote than to start with that. The defense theme, which is always lovely for any defense attorneys in the room, because I may offend you and I don't care. The defense theme was an accident. I just meant to spit on him. And that was the first time that had come out, other than in his psychological evaluation that they provided at the settlement conference. Which, by the way, he had no psychoses or anything, nothing. And then he was such a loving father, and she was a bad girl, because she ran up a huge phone bill list, or cell phone bill. That was basically it. You will be seeing here, as soon as I rush through this, the sentencing PowerPoint that we did in this particular case for the sentencing.
The 3 civilian eyewitnesses that were at the scene that we talked about that were in those photographs, 2 medical examiners, Department of Public Safety, which is our crime lab criminalists, our 2 traffic reconstruction guys who worked on the case for us, 4 prior act witnesses that came in with the officers that had been out to the scene before, Amal herself, myself, me, Detective Boughey, my partner Jeff Paulson, who also worked on this case and did an unbelievable job. Trial lasted about a month, a little over a month, and I'm sure to nobody's surprise, they didn't call anybody. We were hoping that he'd take the stand and Laura would have what we call filleted filet, but that didn't happen, unfortunately.
Chris and I shudder every time we hear this case or this trial classified as a successful prosecution. To us, it's not, I guess. Jury got the case on Monday, February 14th, returned a verdict 8 days later. Yes, lots of wine was consumed in the on 2/22/11. Okay, and sometimes some scotch. The verdict was guilty on the lesser included of second-degree murder. Not guilty of attempted first-degree murder on Amal, guilty on the assault on Amal, and guilty of leaving the scene 2 counts. Because of that verdict, we had to put on aggravators where we alleged for Noor that he was lying in wait in ambush, Amal, emotional physical harm, serious injury, multiple victims. Only witness that we called was Amal. And the verdict, they found him all aggravators on Amal, but hung on the ambush lying in wait for Noor, which is this is what that told us. There were people that were still sitting in that jury that wanted first degree and conceded because of our lousy jury instruction that we have in Arizona regarding lesser includeds, and they were not going to give up on the lying in wait or ambush, and so that they would not find the aggravator, or they wouldn't acquit on the aggravator of lying in wait because they believed he was premeditatedly lying in ambush, or lying in wait, ambush, and so they hung it rather than to not find that aggravator. Most important thing about this photo is I didn't want to use it, but here's Chris's head right there, right in that circle. I think I provided you a copy of the sentencing memorandum. A big use of contention was the use of the psychological report, which the judge said I could not use, where the defendant admitted that he wanted to injure Amal. Sentencing was rather emotional. This was on the front page of the Republic. Amal is there, and she is hugging Marwan. What we had done was presented this video that we're going to show you here very quickly. And Marwan, who had never seen any of the photos of the crime scene, broke out in the middle of it. And there's Amal hugging him as he's taken out, basically, in the courtroom. The defendant was ridiculous. He cried. Here's his wife, who I don't know if you can see, she's in her burqa. She was gone for the entire trial. Did not show up. Ali, you can't really see, is back there also obviously crying. He was there for the trial, but the defense or myself are going to be calling Ali and his wife at trial, obviously, because we believe that they helped them escape. The problem is the defense moved that they appointed counsel, they were granted counsel, and they both invoked. And so we could not, either side could not call them to the stand. The sentencing was ridiculous. Again, it was Judge Steinley. He went on this theological dissertation, the judge did, bringing in every religion possible and quoting from every single one of them. It was very bizarre, and he went on for a really long time. He called him the Saddam Hussein of Phoenix, but then turned around and said this was not an honor killing, you're just a mean old man. And then he blamed the media for designating it as an honor killing. The ultimate sentence was 34.5 years. He will serve 30 years before he can get out. Hopefully hopefully he'll pass away before then from his diabetes. The most disappointing thing was regarding the sentence is that he imposed the absolute maximum he could for Amal's aggravated assault on Amal, but on Noor, he only gave the defendant 1 more year, 16 years, and then stacked them. So it went 15 was the maximum on Noor, and then stacked only 16 years. We could have gone up as high as 22. The only nice thing is those 16 years are flat time. That means day for day. He doesn't get any credit for it. I have talked to DOC, and he will serve about 30 years. Very disappointed in the judge on that sentence, and I think he knows it. So why was this case so different? You know, when we see other cases, there's jealousy, there's sudden rage, heated passion. So Chris and I, over a glass of wine, shockingly, sat down and said, you know, what is it that makes us so different? We decided entitlement. And I think we heard that earlier today. This is a case that isn't about jealousy or love for someone that just makes you go crazy, man, he and his family believe he's entitled to this. And that's what makes the difference.
This, like Laura said, this case kind of threw us both for a loop, and we're very disappointed by the verdict, obviously, and we believe that possibly some overwhelming political correctness that seems to infest this country of ours had some hand in it. I believe that. If you look at the evidence, if you look at some of the things that we've passed out to you guys, you take a look at it and go, what the hell trial was that jury watching? Because it certainly wasn't ours. So we're disappointed, but we're also very excited, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, to be able to kind of share this with you guys and hopefully bring some awareness to that. This is going on right here in the United States of America. And like I said before, it happened in Peoria, Arizona. You know, so I'm guessing it's happening right here in New York City and anywhere else. So from all of this tragedy, you know, we hope that you guys get some help, some answers, and contact us, call us, whatever you do. We're not experts. We kind of learned as we went along, but we learned a lot. And hopefully, you know, we can be a resource in conferences like this as well.